he left Mercedes for glory. 14 races later! Where's the podium? This is the story of a dream move colliding with a brutal reality. Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari red. It felt like cinema, like destiny, like the script had already been written. But Formula One doesn't care about scripts. It cares about lap time, tire temps, and a car that either talks to you or fights you corner after corner. Today, we're unpacking how we got from the announcement shock to the early hope to the setup and driving style struggles that have defined the first half of 2025, and what absolutely has to change after the summer break if this fairy tale is going to find its ending. Let's rewind. The day the move became real, Hamilton, to Ferrari every social feed, every group chat, every pit lane whisper exploded. 7 titles, 14 years with Mercedes, countless Sundays where the silver car felt inevitable, and suddenly, a prancing horse on his chest. You couldn't dream up better theater. It wasn't just a transfer. It was a cultural moment. Fans who grew up on Schumacher's scarlet domination saw a bridge to that mythology. Ferrari iconic, romantic, forever chasing the next chapter of glory. Hamilton iconic, relentless, forever chasing the next challenge. Together, it felt like sport turning into legend. Then came the first laps in red. The shakedowns, the testing runs, the quiet photos of Lewis sitting deep in the cockpit, visor down, learning the language of a totally new car. The early hope was real. Straight line speed looked decent. The balance window seemed broader than last year. There were weekends where the timing screens teased something. Little flashes. A sector here, a long run there. A qualifying lap that looked alive right up until the final corner. And then Shanghai happened. Not a Grand Prix win, a sprint win, but you could see what it meant. A deep exhale, a reminder that Hamilton's racecraft and feel for evolving conditions are still razor sharp. It wasn't the big trophy, but it was validation. The combination can work. And yet, 14 races in, the standings tell a colder truth. P6, a handful of missed opportunities. A car that has speed, but not always the kind of speed that meets Lewis halfway. That's where the story pivots from headlines to the details that actually decide races. How the car rotates on entry, how the rear axle talks to the driver on throttle, how the tire comes in or refuses to across a stint. Let's get into it. Hamilton at his best is all about trust at turn-in. Give him a front end that bites and a rear that stays planted just long enough for him to carry speed. Lean on the brake, rotate the car, and fire out. He'll dance on the limit. He'll do it lap after lap. The problem so far is that this Ferrari's sweet spot is narrow and it keeps shifting with track temperature, wind, and fuel load. On some Saturdays, the front wakes up, the car feels connected, and the lap time comes. On other Saturdays, the front washes just a touch, the rear gets skittish under combined braking, and the confidence evaporates. Half a tenth at turn-in becomes 2/10 by the end of the lap. Start that far back in this field. You're in traffic. You're losing front tire life. You're reacting rather than dictating. And the whole Sunday is uphill. Low speed traction has been another silent tax. Out of tight corners where you're asking the rear tires to do the heavy lifting, the Ferrari can be peaky. Too much wheel spin early in a stint, and you graze the surface of the tire. Too cautious, and you give up drive. Hamilton's trying to thread that needle. But when your setup doesn't give you predictable rear support, you're constantly managing risk. It's a drag race to the next braking zone that you're losing by half a car length. Again and again. Over 1 lap. That's frustrating. Over 50. That's your race. Brake and feel matters. 2. The relationship between brake-by-wire, engine braking, and differential settings is like a fingerprint from team to team. At Mercedes, Hamilton spent years building layers of muscle memory. At Ferrari, the cues are different. The initial bite, the migration, the way the rear follows the front as you bleed off speed. These micro feelings decide whether you can brake 5 meters later and still trust the car to rotate. Right now, it's clear that some weekends, the car's speaking his language, and others, it's like learning a dialect mid-lane. You see it in those lock-up EV corners. or in the half-commit turn-ins where he catches a snap, releases, and resets. Every correction costs energy and tire life. Tire warm-up and management have been a double-edged sword. Some tracks get heat into the rubber quickly. Others leave you skating for a lap and a half. When Hamilton nails the outlap delta, the tire opens and he can attack, the car looks transformed. But too often, the peak arrives a fraction late, or the fronts and rears don't sync, and he ends up fighting a seesaw. Front limited mid-corner, rear limited on exit. That split personality eats consistency. Meanwhile, long-run degradation demands ruthless discipline. If you're just a bit off balance, you slide. If you slide, you cook the surface. If you cook the surface, your next lap is slower and hotter. Welcome to the spiral. Strategy hasn't been innocent either. This era is all about timing. Your stops around safety cars and virtual safety cars. Committing early to a plan. And this is key, having a car that makes alternative strategies viable. When you don't qualify at the sharp end, you're playing chess from the second row of pieces. You need bold calls and clean execution. Ferrari has improved, but the margins are thin, and even a 3-second delay in the box or a lap too late pit call turns a P4 shot into P8 pain. When your rivals are clinical, you can't leave crumbs on the table. And then there's the teammate dynamic. Sharing a garage with a driver who's blisteringly quick over one lap sharpens everything. It can be a gift because that reference forces the team to unlock setup breakthroughs. It can also distort weekends. If the car's base balance naturally flatters one style, say, a driver who attacks the front aggressively and lives with a mobile rear view can get trapped chasing someone else's window. The winning move is convergence. Build a car that gives both drivers something to lean on. Until then, the quicker qualifier dictates the storyline on Sunday. So what has to change after the summer break? 4 pillars. First, qualifying. Track position is the currency of this era. Hamilton doesn't need magic. He needs a car that's predictable on the knife edge of Q2223 and on that final Q3 push. That means a setup bias toward confidence at turn-in and traction at corner exit, even if the absolute peak downforce number looks prettier on paper the other way. Give up a sliver of mid-corner peak. Gain repeatability. The goal is simple. Start for places higher on average, and half of the Sunday damage disappears before the lights go out. Second, widen the setup window. Right now, Ferrari can be too temperature sensitive. The team has to chase stability in how the floor and rear suspension load the tire across changing ambient and wind conditions. That means correlation. Hammering the simulator, making the aero map less peaky, and refining the mechanical platform so that small changes in ride height or rake don't flip the balance from planted to knife. If the driver knows that a 2-click front wing change won't send the rear into the weeds, he'll commit earlier and harder. Third, braking and differential mapping that fits Hamilton's hands. This is where marginal gains turn into podium chances. Tune the brake migration to keep the rear axle calm under trail brake. Work the diff preload in corner face settings so that the car rotates without the snap when he reapplies throttle. Let him stand the car on its nose, rotate, and go. It's not glamorous, but it's the difference between hesitating at apex and trusting the car to do exactly what he asks. Fourth, operational aggression. Own the pit wall moments. If you're not starting on the front row, you need to steal places with decisive calls. Commit to the undercut earlier. Cover the overcut ruthlessly. Position for safety car windows. Practice the stops until 2.1 seconds becomes boring. And on outlaps, coordinate the tire prep like a synchronized dance. Clear track, clear calls, clear targets. If the race pace is good but not great, you win the day on the edges. And Hamilton, he'll do what he's always done. Adapt. If the rear won't give him the rotation he loves, he'll shift to an earlier, more geometric line slow the entry to protect exit traction. If the front's so reluctant, he'll work with camber and pressures to find bite without burning the surface. He'll keep iterating on braking points and micro lifts to keep the tire in its happy window. He's elite at reading a race as it unfolds, when to ignore the lap delta, when to defend the tire, when to pounce. Give him a car he can predict, and he'll do the rest. The calendar, after the break, is built for momentum. There are fast corners that reward a stable rear, There are stop-start sectors that expose traction weaknesses, and there are heat-heavy afternoons where tire management is everything. The target isn't fantasy, it's execution. Convert Saturdays. Nail first stints. If the outright win is out of reach, make P3 the floor on good weekends and P5 the floor on bad ones. That's how podiums appear almost inevitably, because you're always within striking distance when others stumble. None of this erases the pressure. The headlines are loud. P6 stings. A single sprint win doesn't satisfy a champion who walks into every garage expecting to fight for the biggest trophies. But the difference between brutal reality and believable redemption in Formula One can be 2 tenths of balance and 1 bold strategy call. You don't need miracles, you need margins. Remember the promise of the announcement? Remember the early flashes? The ingredients are on the table. A driver who still reads the limit like Braille, a team that bleeds for Sunday glory, and a car that needs a clearer voice. Post-summer, the mission is clarity. Clarity in setup, clarity in operation, clarity in how the car should feel when it's right. If Ferrari delivers that, and Hamilton trusts it, the podium isn't a dream sequence. It's the next logical scene. He left Mercedes for glory. 14 races later, the question isn't, where's the podium? It's what's the plan? Because if the plan is bold, and the execution is clean, and the car finally speaks Hamilton's language, then the story everyone imagined the day he pulled on that red race suit. The one with fireworks and champagne and a scarlet car crossing the line first still has time to write itself. Until then, the reality is hard. But the ending, that's still up for grabs.